Have you ever noticed that the most genuine men you know are often the least successful at dating? It's not a coincidence. It's philosophy. Søren Kierkegaard, 180 years ago, had already diagnosed this paradox that's now exploding in your empty DMs and vanishing matches. Modern dating wasn't built to reward authenticity. It was built to reward performance. And here's the cruel irony. The more real you are, the harder you fight against a system that rewards the artificial. If you've ever felt like a fish out of water in swipe culture, if you've ever wondered why just be yourself seems like the worst dating advice anyone can give, Kierkegaard has answers. Today we're dissecting why authenticity is algorithmically punished, how dating became an aesthetic prison, and why the anxiety you feel might actually be the path to something real. Brace yourself. The truth will hurt before it sets you free. Kierkegaard had a term for what we now call dating apps, the crowd. Not literally, of course, but conceptually, he nailed it. For Kierkegaard, the crowd represents everything that flattens human complexity into digestible, marketable units. Sound familiar? Every dating app is designed around one core principle. Make yourself as broadly appealing as possible. Optimize your photos. Craft the perfect bio. Follow the formula. Be what the algorithm rewards. But here's where it gets philosophically brutal. The moment you optimize for mass appeal, you cease to be an individual. You become a demographic. Think about it. The algorithm doesn't care that you spent 3 hours last night reading Dostoevsky. It cares that you have abs in photo number 2. It doesn't reward the depth of your conversation skills. It rewards the sharpness of your jawline in the right lighting. The authentic man faces an impossible choice. Be genuine and watch your profile get buried by the algorithm, or perform optimized masculinity and lose yourself in the process. Kierkegaard wrote, "The crowd is the lie." He meant that truth emerges only in individual existence, never in collective approval. But dating apps are collective approval systems. They are literally designed to reward lies, or at least strategic omissions of truth. You know what gets matches? The guy who lists entrepreneur instead of figuring out my startup. The guy whose bio says adventure seeker instead of I read philosophy on weekends and sometimes feel overwhelmed by modern life. The guy who performs confidence instead of admitting uncertainty. Who shows his gym body but hides his bookshelf. Who crafts witty openers instead of saying what he actually thinks. And here's the cruelest part. It works. The performance gets results. The authentic guys watch from the sidelines wondering what they're doing wrong. They're not doing anything wrong. They're just refusing to participate in what Kierkegaard called the aesthetic reduction of existence. The man who posts his real interests instead of what gets matches. The man who shows vulnerability instead of manufactured confidence. The man who refuses to reduce himself to 6 photos and a witty one-liner. He's not failing at the game, he's refusing to play it. But refusing to play doesn't mean the game stops affecting you. And that refusal, that's where the real struggle begins. Because now he's caught between 2 worlds. The authentic self that feels invisible, and the performed self that feels empty. Kierkegaard identified 3 stages of human existence. The first, the aesthetic stage. And modern dating, it's trapped there completely. In the aesthetic stage, life becomes about endless consumption of experiences. Novelty, pleasure, the constant pursuit of the next beautiful thing. Sound like your dating app feed? The aesthetic man, in Kierkegaard's framework, lives entirely in the moment. He seeks immediate gratification, avoids commitment, and treats relationships like entertainment. He's not evil, he's just never grown beyond the surface level of existence. Now, look at swipe culture. It's the aesthetic stage weaponized and gamified. Every profile is a product. Every match is a dopamine hit. Every conversation is disposable entertainment. You're not looking for a person, you're looking for an experience. And when that experience gets boring, you swipe to the next one. The apps have turned dating into what Kierkegaard would call crop rotation, constantly changing experiences to avoid the anxiety of depth. Bored with the brunette who likes hiking? Swipe right on the blonde who does yoga. Tired of the intellectual conversations? Find someone who keeps it light. But here's where the authentic man gets crushed. He doesn't want crop rotation. He wants to dig deep with one person. He wants to move beyond the surface. He wants what Kierkegaard called the ethical stage, commitment, depth, the choice to grow with someone rather than consume them. But the system punishes depth. The algorithm rewards fresh engagement, new matches, constant activity. It literally profits from your inability to settle down with one person. Think about the language of dating apps. Keep your options open. There's always someone better around the corner. Don't settle. It's aesthetic philosophy disguised as empowerment. The authentic man finds himself in an impossible position. He wants to have real conversations, but the platform rewards witty one-liners. He wants to move beyond small talk, but depth kills the playful vibe that gets responses. He wants exclusivity, but the very design of the app whispers, why choose one when you can have many? He's fighting against the entire philosophical foundation of the platform, and he's fighting alone. The aesthetic stage isn't just about how you use dating apps. It's about how dating apps use you. They need you to stay in the aesthetic stage forever. Because the moment you find something real, the moment you commit, the moment you delete the app, they lose a customer. Your authentic desire for depth is bad for business. Your longing for something real threatens their business model. So they keep feeding you the aesthetic drug, more options, better filters, premium features to help you optimize your performance in the aesthetic game. And here's the psychological trap that Kierkegaard predicted. The aesthetic stage creates what he called the sickness unto death, a spiritual emptiness that masquerades as freedom. You think you're empowered because you have hundreds of matches, but you're actually paralyzed because none of them matter. You think you're successful because you can get dates, but you're actually hollow because none of them connect. The aesthetic man on dating apps becomes addicted to the validation of the swipe, not the reality of the person. He starts measuring his worth by metrics that have nothing to do with his capacity for love. Match count, response rates, how quickly someone texts back. He becomes a consumer of romantic experiences rather than a participant in romantic growth. He starts treating potential partners like Netflix shows, bingeable entertainment that he can pause, skip, or cancel the moment something more appealing appears. But the authentic man sees through this illusion. He recognizes that the aesthetic stage is not freedom, it's a sophisticated form of spiritual imprisonment. And that recognition creates a different kind of suffering. The anxiety of knowing you want something the system isn't designed to give you. But the authentic man knows something the aesthetic man doesn't. Endless options create endless paralysis. Infinite choice creates infinite dissatisfaction. The pursuit of the perfect match prevents you from building anything real with the imperfect human being right in front of you.
Kierkegaard wrote that anxiety is not a flaw in human existence, it's a feature. It's the signal that tells you when you're living authentically versus when you're living a lie. And if you're an authentic man in the modern dating world, you're probably anxious as hell. But here's what most people get wrong about that anxiety. It's not a sign you're doing something wrong. It's a sign you're doing something right. The performed man, the one who's optimized his profile, mastered the game, learned all the tricks, he sleeps well at night. He gets matches, he gets dates, he gets validation. But he also gets something else, a creeping sense that none of it is real, that he's living someone else's life. The authentic man lies awake wondering why he can't just play the game, why he can't just post the shirtless gym photo that would triple his matches, why he can't just send the copy-paste opener that works on everyone, why he can't just fake confidence until it becomes real. His anxiety isn't neurosis, it's moral intelligence. It's his soul rejecting the lie. Kierkegaard called this the anxiety of becoming. It's the discomfort you feel when you're caught between who you actually are and who you think you need to be to get what you want. Most people medicate this anxiety away, with alcohol, with distractions, with more swiping. But the authentic man learns to listen to it, because anxiety, in Kierkegaard's framework, is the teacher that guides you toward authentic choice. Every time you feel that knot in your stomach before sending a vulnerable text, that's anxiety teaching you about courage. Every time you hesitate before posting something real instead of something strategic, that's anxiety pointing you toward integrity. Every time you feel that sinking feeling when someone doesn't respond to your authentic message, that's not rejection, that's alignment. That's the universe saving you from investing in someone who couldn't handle your reality anyway. But here's where it gets complicated. Rejection hurts more when you're authentic. When you're performing, rejection bounces off you because it's not really you being rejected, it's the persona. But when you're genuine, rejection cuts deeper because it feels like they're rejecting the real you. This is the price of authenticity. Higher stakes, deeper wounds, more intense anxiety. The performed man gets rejected and thinks, I need to optimize my approach. The authentic man gets rejected and thinks, maybe I'm fundamentally unlovable. But Kierkegaard would say that this deeper pain is actually a gift. It's the anxiety that teaches you the difference between being wanted and being chosen, between being attractive and being loved, between finding someone who likes your performance and finding someone who can handle your truth. The anxiety you feel when you choose authenticity over optimization, that's not weakness. That's the birth pang of becoming who you actually are. That's your soul refusing to settle for connections that require you to be someone else. Most men run from this anxiety back into the comfortable lie of performance. They'd rather be successfully fake than unsuccessfully real. But the authentic man learns to dance with the anxiety, to let it teach him, to use it as a compass pointing toward what actually matters. The question isn't how to eliminate the anxiety of authentic dating. The question is, what is that anxiety trying to teach you about what you actually want?
After the aesthetic stage comes what Kierkegaard called the ethical stage. This is where you stop consuming experiences and start choosing commitments, where you stop optimizing for options and start building something real with one person. In dating terms, it's the moment you delete the apps not because you found someone, but because you decided to find someone. It's choosing depth over breadth, vulnerability over strategy, growth over comfort. But here's the problem. Modern dating culture is designed to keep you trapped in the aesthetic stage forever. The entire infrastructure fights against ethical commitment. The ethical man wants to have the same conversation with one person for months, not clever banter with dozens of matches. He wants to plan a future, not just a weekend. He wants to work through problems, not swipe past them. This puts him at war with the entire dating ecosystem. Apps profit from your aesthetic restlessness. Social media rewards your romantic variety. Your friends think you're settling if you're not constantly exploring options. The ethical choice in modern dating isn't just choosing one person. It's choosing to believe in the possibility of depth with one person when the entire culture is telling you that depth is naive. Think about the vulnerability required here. The ethical man has to risk saying, "I want to try something real with you," in a world that mocks catching feelings. He has to risk exclusivity in a culture that worships keeping your options open. He has to risk looking desperate for wanting commitment in a dating scene that treats commitment like a consolation prize for people who can't do better. This is where authentic masculinity becomes radical. Not because it's aggressive or dominant, but because it's willing to be earnest in an ironic world, willing to be serious about love in a culture that treats everything as casual. The ethical man stops asking, "How do I get more matches?" and starts asking, "How do I become someone worthy of real love?" He stops trying to be attractive to everyone and starts trying to be valuable to someone. But this shift creates its own anxiety. When you move from the aesthetic to the ethical stage, you have to confront the possibility of failure, not just rejection, actual failure. The failure of building something real and watching it fall apart. The aesthetic man never really fails because he never really tries. Every rejection is just data to optimize the next approach. But the ethical man puts his actual heart on the line. When that relationship doesn't work out, it's not just a failed optimization, it's a failed investment of his authentic self. This is why most people stay in the aesthetic stage. The ethical stage demands courage, not just to choose someone, but to keep choosing them when it gets difficult. To stay committed not just through the exciting parts, but through the boring parts. Through the parts where growth requires discomfort. The ethical man has to learn that love isn't just about finding the right person, it's about becoming the right person. It's about choosing to grow together instead of growing apart. It's about building something that can survive both of your imperfections. But here's what the ethical stage offers that the aesthetic stage never can. The possibility of being fully known by another human being. Not just the curated version of yourself, not just the optimized profile, but the complete, complicated, authentic person you actually are. The aesthetic man collects admirers. The ethical man builds intimacy. And intimacy, real intimacy, only happens when you stop performing and start being. This is the choice that separates authentic men from optimized men. The willingness to risk being fully seen by someone who might not like what they find.
Beyond the aesthetic and ethical stages lies Kierkegaard's ultimate stage, faith. And this is where dating becomes truly philosophical, because faith, for Kierkegaard, means embracing the absurd. In love, the absurd is this: you cannot guarantee that vulnerability will be met with vulnerability. You cannot ensure that authenticity will be rewarded. You cannot control whether your genuine self will be chosen or rejected. But you choose to be vulnerable anyway. You choose to be authentic anyway. You choose to love anyway. This is what Kierkegaard called the knight of faith. Someone who acts authentically, not because they're guaranteed success, but because authenticity itself is the only way to live with integrity. The knight of faith in dating doesn't optimize for results. He optimizes for truth. He doesn't strategize for maximum appeal. He simply shows up as himself and trusts that the right person will recognize him. This sounds naive until you realize something profound. Every real relationship that has ever worked required this leap of faith from both people. At some point, they both had to stop performing and risk being seen. The faith stage doesn't eliminate anxiety, it transforms it. Instead of the anxiety of, "Am I doing this right?" it becomes the anxiety of, "Am I being true to myself?" Instead of the anxiety of outcomes, it becomes the anxiety of authenticity.
The faithful man accepts that he might spend years being misunderstood, overlooked, or rejected by people who can't handle his depth. But he also accepts something else, that the alternative, living as someone he's not, is a form of spiritual death. Here's where Kierkegaard offers genuine hope. He believed that when you live authentically, you create the conditions for authentic connection. Not guaranteed connection, but possible connection. Real connection. The performed man attracts people who are attracted to performances. The authentic man attracts people who are attracted to authenticity. The pool is smaller, but the water is deeper. This doesn't mean authentic men always find love. It means that when they do find love, it's actually love, not just mutual performance, not just aesthetic attraction, not just convenient compatibility. The faithful approach to dating requires what Kierkegaard called passionate intensity. Not the intensity of desperation, but the intensity of commitment to being yourself regardless of the consequences. You text what you actually think, not what you think they want to hear. You share what you actually care about, not what makes you seem interesting. You show who you actually are, not who you think they'll choose. And yes, this path is harder. Yes, it takes longer. Yes, it hurts more when it doesn't work out, but it offers something the optimized path never can. The possibility of being chosen for who you actually are. The knight of faith doesn't need guarantees because he's not playing for external validation. He's playing for internal alignment. He's not trying to win the dating game. He's trying to win the integrity game. And here's the beautiful paradox. When you stop trying to be chosen by everyone, you become choosable by the right someone. When you stop performing for mass appeal, you become genuinely appealing to the people that matter. The authentic path isn't about finding someone despite your authenticity. It's about finding someone because of your authenticity. Someone who doesn't just tolerate your depth, someone who craves it. Kierkegaard's final insight: the anxiety you feel when choosing authenticity over optimization isn't a bug in the system. It's proof that you're becoming real in a world full of performances. That anxiety is your soul's way of saying, keep going, this matters. You matter. And somewhere out there is someone who will recognize both.
If this moved something inside you, stay. We're building something for those who don't fake it. Subscribe, not just for the content, but for the confrontation. And if this left a wound, maybe it was meant to. Sometimes the best way to go deeper is to share the pain. Share it. Someone out there is still optimizing their profile instead of optimizing their soul, still performing confidence while dying inside from loneliness. Kierkegaard's revelation wasn't that authentic men should give up on love. It was that authentic love requires authentic men. The crowd will always choose the performance over the person. But somewhere in the noise, there's someone who recognizes authenticity not as weakness, but as the rarest form of strength. Your anxiety isn't your enemy. It's your compass, and it's pointing towards someone who won't make you choose between being loved and being yourself.